Well, here we are. It's with great sadness that I have to make this video because I did not think that I would be making this video so early in the postseason. And as you guys can tell by the title of this video, this is about my Brooklyn Nets. I didn't think that I would be fortunate enough not to make this video at some point throughout the playoffs. However, the fact that I'm here on the Monday afternoon ahead of game 4, talking about how I've been so thoroughly underwhelmed, disappointed, embarrassed, ashamed, all of these negative superlatives, all because of my Brooklyn Nets. As we all know, tonight, Monday night, I don't know when this video is going to go up. I'm sure it'll be either Tuesday or Wednesday, but game 4 is tonight. And this is when the Celtics can officially close out their first round series against the Brooklyn Nets. And unfortunately, this series was over by game 2. Before we get into this vent session that I'm about to go into, I need to address what's going on behind me. And if you're looking in the background at my naked bed, no, you're not. A little bit of bad timing. I had to change my sheets. It's been about 2 weeks since I've changed them, and I know that's a little long, but I know some of you crusty butts out there go way longer than 2 weeks without changing your seats. So just bear with me. Look up here, not behind me. My boobs are on my face. It all started going wrong before the playoffs even began. I am not somebody who likes to divvy out blame to a single person in a sports organization, whether it's the GM, the head coach, the players, an individual player, whomever it may be. I know that team sports are a team are a team sport, obviously, and that whenever something goes wrong, there is always more than one person who's at fault. There are some very, very extreme circumstances where that is not the case. In the Sacramento Kings case, for example, their prolonged ineptitude is courtesy of their ownership. And I've mentioned this multiple times. You don't go through multiple coaches and multiple GMs and bring in multiple star players who then wind up becoming disgruntled with the organization by accident. But a lot of the times, teams falter in the postseason just because they're either not talented enough, their game plan isn't good enough. But someone who I have repeatedly fucking popped off on, God, I get so mad just fucking talking about it. It's Steve Nash. Steve Nash, who was handpicked by Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving for some wretched, godforsaken reason. I don't know if Steve Nash has dirt on KD and Kyrie. I don't know if he knows that they're working with like right-wing paramilitary groups throughout the world to overthrow the governments governing these nations. I don't know what this man did to earn a job with the Brooklyn Nets. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and every game for these 2.5 years has proven that Steve Nash has no idea what the fuck is going on. And not only have I popped off on him on Twitter, but whenever I get the chance to talk about what makes the Brooklyn Nets so futile, it's Steve fucking Nash. Where it begins with Steve Nash is, it's kind of hard to even begin with where it begins with Steve Nash because there's not a single play in his playbook that I think I've seen Brooklyn run effectively. Like, I'm talking a designated set, not even a simple motion, some flex action to get someone open on the baseline, no Spain pick and roll, none of that. And in the postseason, when Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are getting clamped as hard as they are by the Boston Celtics, who, by the way, are playing spectacular basketball. It pains me to say it, but they really do look like a championship contender. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Smart, Horford, all those guys, they are balling. But it begins with their effort on defense. I know that they have multiple exceptional defenders. They have great size, great length, great switchability, and that has ultimately stifled Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Outside of Easter Sunday, when Kyrie had 39, there have been very few memorable moments by both of these guys. I think in Game 3, Kevin Durant only had 16 points, didn't take a shot throughout the entirety of the fourth quarter. I'm actually, here, let's go ahead and take a look at the stats together. Through 3 games, Kevin Durant is shooting 36.5% from the field overall and averaging just 22 points a night. You have Bruce Brown, who has been your most reliable offensive player. And if it weren't for Bruce Brown, if it weren't for Seth Curry and Goran Dragic, this team would have been getting waxed by 30. Now, allow me to go back to full screen here so I can have your full undivided attention. There has been a lot of discourse on the internet where people are blaming Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving almost exclusively for this team's futility. And while I will get into their inability to make shots, Steve Nash is not doing anything to help his players. He's not doing anything special to get them open shots. He's not adjusting to anything that Boston's doing. If you know that Boston is going to double and triple team Kevin Durant when he gets the ball, you need to make sure that the offense has multiple players moving around in any sort of set. Get multiple actions going, whether it's on the ball, away from the ball. Make sure they're quick hitting as well, because you can't allow Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to get that step back if Kevin Durant is lucky enough to beat them off the dribble. Like, Jason Tatum has blocked Kevin Durant multiple times in this series on jumpers. And you know Kevin Durant's 32 years old or 33 years old, however old he is. He's not the athletic freak he once was, and he never really was much of an athletic freak in terms of his explosiveness, his speed, his agility. He never really was that. But it was his craftiness, his ability to get off these wonky shots. And yes, he did that throughout the regular season. And it's almost to the detriment of the team, because throughout the regular season, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving bailed out Steve Nash's inability to coach a game on multiple occasions. You had Kevin Durant average damn near 30 a game for the entire season. But that shit doesn't fly in the playoffs when you're going up against a team like Boston, who can defend 1 through 5 with multiple guys, who swarm Kevin Durant every time he touches the ball. You just can't get away with playing your normal ISO ball. It simply doesn't work. And it's painfully obvious that it's not working because, again, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have effectively been neutralized. Even when Bruce Brown and Seth Curry and Goran Dragic are getting their buckets, a lot of them, Bruce Brown gets a lot of his points in transition. He gets a lot, I don't want to say a lot, but he hits a couple catch and shoot threes every game. He gets a lot of his points off of hustle, being a pest on defense. Like, there were a couple plays where he was disruptive near half court and came away with a steal and laid it up for 2. Seth Curry is another guy who thrives exclusively off action. And Goran Dragic is not really the same, but he is at least benefiting off of the enormous pressure that KD and Kyrie are experiencing. Now, another thing that Steve Nash has never done well, and I'm not sure ever will do well, is manage his rotations. How people are not more critical of this guy on the internet is beyond me, because Nets fans, we've been watching this every game for 2 years. Steve Nash routinely mismanaging his rotations. Whether it was in game, I think it was game 2, it was not playing Goran Dragic for the first 10 minutes of the third quarter. It's Blake Griffin being DNP CDs every game since March, and the only time he got action was in the fourth quarter of game 3 when the game was already getting away from Brooklyn. And what happened when he came in? He played with energy. He played with intensity. He tied up Jason Tatum on a drive. He was holding his own with Jaylen Brown while he was trying to dance on the perimeter. So we were clamoring for Blake Griffin and Nick Claxton to be Steve Nash's primary bigs once it became abundantly clear that Andre Drummond cannot hang with this team. He's too slow. He's not athletic enough. He's getting manhandled by Horford on the glass. He's not playable this series. And it's Steve Nash's job to recognize that, especially when Nick Claxton has been the superior player. Every time he's been on the court, he's looked better than Andre Drummond. He can switch. He can actually guard Tatum on the perimeter. Like, decently well, about as well as any 7-footer is going to. He can play on the perimeter. He can play down low. He gives you guys a passing option if you are fortunate enough to get into the paint against this Celtics defense. He just brings more to the table. And while he was seeing more minutes, Steve Nash was still ultimately giving minutes that should have gone to Blake Griffin to Andre Drummond. And that's simply unacceptable. The most frustrating part about these Blake Griffin minutes is that we got 6.5 of them on Sunday or Saturday, pardon me. And we also got 6.5 minutes of Bruce Brown in the fourth quarter. I don't recall. And also I was practicing self-care and only watching the game like in my peripherals because we did have a little bit of a gathering at my house. I don't recall these guys playing together. I don't recall Bruce Brown and Blake Griffin playing alongside one another, who, at least on that night, looked like your two best defensive options. And then, we can't forget about this. Steve Nash decided to deploy a Kyrie Irving, Patty Mills, and Seth Curry 3-guard lineup while Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were on the floor. Why? You throw out your 3 most petite, your 3 smallest, your 3 scrawniest guards who can't really defend anyway, and you're going to put them out there against a Celtics team where their smallest player, Marcus Smart, is taller than any one of your guards? Who is... I don't understand how people are letting this happen, how people are letting this fly. I want to see more people in the national media call out Steve Nash, Stephen A. Smith, Magic Johnson, Stan Van Gundy. They're all talking about KD and Kyrie, and yes, they haven't been great, but at least Stan Van Gundy can tell you that as a coach, it's your job to help your players when they're struggling, to help them get easy looks, help them get to the free throw line, draw up a play, draw up literally anything that gets Kevin Durant to the foul line. I mean, Jamal Crawford noted it. He tweeted about how you have to run misdirections and at least do something to break up the flow of the offense. Because it just seems like after the jump ball goes up, the Nets get their possession, whenever it is. They run some sort of, weak-ass play to begin the game, and then they're just playing iso ball. You can't play iso ball against a team that is full of elite individual defenders. And not only that, you can't play iso ball against the number one team, the number one defensive team in the NBA. It's bad coaching, it's bad game design, it's bad everything. And I don't understand how people kind of just let this, I don't want to say go under the radar because people have been talking about it, but the conversation about Steve Nash, who deserves to coach in Greenland next year, or Ohio, literally just a recreational league in the middle of Ohio, how he's not having more blame directed at him. And I understand that it's part of the nature of the business. You're ultimately just trying to create content as a media person, as a commentator, and there is no better content farm than superstars in the NBA. And in this case, it's Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant getting thoroughly outplayed by Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. As much as I've railed on Steve Nash over the last couple of weeks, months, years, whatever, Kevin Durant has been inexcusably bad this postseason. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he is dealing with some sort of injury. I don't know if that's going to come out later on, that he had a lower body injury and he's afraid to I don't know if there's if his calf is sore, if his Achilles is sore, if his heels are sore, and he's kind of taking it a little gingerly because he doesn't want to re-aggravate anything. I don't know if this will ever come out. But regardless, you're Kevin Durant. You cannot be so passive. You cannot be so just bad. That's the only way for me to describe it. I saw a quote from him the other day where he said that he had been thinking too much, and that's why his turnovers are piling up. That's why he's not looking to get his shot off that often. And I can't help but wonder. And yes, while Kevin Durant's turnovers have been a problem, he's been loosey-goosey with the basketball. Just very, nonchalant, dribbling into three guys for no reason. Jason Tatum has put Kevin Durant in Alcatraz. I think that's the best way to describe it. And part of me is blaming Kevin Durant for his play because he is the player and the players are responsible for executing. But I can't help but think that he's thinking so much because somebody has to coach. Someone has to coach the team. Someone has to think of some sort of action to get the ball moving. And no one on the sideline is doing that. And it sucks that it has to fall on the players who are busy trying to deal with this fucking wave of intense defense, and they're also worrying about where the ball is going to go to. How is Boston going to fucking shut down this play that we're going to run? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I've played sports my whole life. I've never played at like a level comparable to the NBA, but a lot of the times when I was in high school and I found myself, being bad as I was in high school and as I still am today, a lot of it was like Kevin Durant mentioned, you're just thinking too much. And the minute you start thinking, and any professional athlete will tell you this, the minute you start thinking instead of reacting is the minute that you just begin to deteriorate and you fall off. And we've seen this all throughout the course of sports. I mean, Chris Paul just had a brutal meltdown in Game 4 against the Pelicans. Everybody points to LeBron's finals in 2010 where he was putting up numbers like Kevin Durant. I mean, it was like between LeBron and KD, you're looking at two of the greatest basketball players ever who look like they were second round draft picks. I mean, statistically, Kevin Durant is only marginally better than Bruce Brown at this point. And no disrespect to Bruce. I love Bruce. He's the only guy who's been playing for something. It's just so bizarre. And you watch the games, you watch the highlights back, you watch certain plays back, and Kevin Durant just does not have it. He just does not have it right now. And there's really no more I can say about that because if he's not doing it, the Nets are not going anywhere. And I mean, Kyrie has not been as worse, at least from a shooting perspective, but it's the same thing. I mean, the Nets come down, they give up a bucket, and this I've seen this happen again for 2 years. They'll give up a bucket on defense. They'll mosey on down the court. They won't get into any sets. Instead, it'll just be a 1-5 pick and roll or a 1-4 pick and roll. And if you're doing that with Drummond or you're doing that with Claxton, it's cool, whatever. But one of those guys comes up, sets the screen. Kyrie tries to attack off the dribble, but he's double teamed as soon as he gets inside the 3-point line. So he has to pull the ball out, and the next thing you know, there's 14 seconds on the shot clock, and you've essentially wasted an entire possession and have only involved 2 players on defense. That's not how you're going to win a series against the second best team in the Eastern Conference, a team that looks like they're on their way to the championship. Oh, dude, I cannot end this video also without talking about the biggest piece of news regarding this series, and that's, of course, Ben Simmons. As we all know, Ben Simmons has not played basketball in about 10 months. He got traded to Brooklyn from Philly, yada, yada. Everyone was gearing up for his big, triumphant return to NBA basketball. And that's not happening. There was optimism that he'd be able to return for either Game 3 or Game 4, depending on how his ramping up went. And then also apparently dependent on Brooklyn's performance because after that disgusting loss in Game 3, it came out that Ben Simmons will not be playing in Game 4 for the Brooklyn Nets. And I can't help but sit here and think, why would he play? Why would Ben Simmons, who hasn't played basketball in 10 months, suit up for the Brooklyn Nets when the series is basically over? He's going to suit up for them, not really contribute anything because, again, he hasn't played in 10 months. And why are people shocked at this? I understand it's an opportunity to get your jokes off, and that's fine. It's content, whatever. But, people were, sincerely surprised that this is happening. And, they're talking about Ben Simmons being soft. Stephen A is talking about how he quit on his teammates at LSU. He quit on his teammates in Philadelphia. He quit on his teammates now. And I'm like, guys, after almost a year off. He was going to come back, be on a minutes restriction, obviously, play like 18, 20 minutes a night. He's going to come back, play those 20 minutes in game 4 or whatever it is, and potentially re-aggravate his back while playing in a game that's essentially meaningless. Because I don't give a fuck, man. This game 4, whatever happens, it's meaningless. Even if they win, Brooklyn's going back to Boston in game 5 and getting shit on. They might lose by 30. And do you know why I can proclaim this? Because I've watched a lot of Nets basketball, not just this year, but over the course of all the years. Unfortunately, I was too young to remember them going to the finals in 2002 and 2003. I was only like 6 or 7. I really wasn't watching basketball like that. Or as I became older, became a little bit more sentient, added a few more IQ points. I watched this team go 12 and 70. I watched this team win 22, 24, 30 games, whatever. I watched this team, Billy King, I should say, mortgage the future for the husks of Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry, and Gerald Wallace. I watched this team trade for D'Angelo Russell and then ultimately turn into a contender. So I've seen a lot of basketball, and I don't want this to be a dick measuring contest between all Nets fans because we have seen a lot of basketball. And especially with this year, as a fan, when you become so captivated by your team and you can't help but look away, you pick up on things. Nothing fundamentally has changed for Brooklyn in these last 2 years. Nothing. Just the players on the roster. And through it all, when James Harden was here, when James Harden wasn't here, when Kyrie was hurt, or when Kyrie was up, or before Kyrie rejoined the team, when Kevin Durant was hurt, when Joe Harris was hurt, when he was healthy, when all these guys were healthy, nothing changed. It was all the same. And strangely enough, it got worse after Mike D'Antoni left. And you guys can miss me with the, oh, well, this team was predicated on being built around James Harden and Joe Harris. It doesn't fucking matter. Joe Harris gets hurt in the beginning of the season. You know that essentially, as the Brooklyn Nets, you're a lock for the postseason. Even without Kevin Durant for however many games it was, you're still in the postseason. You're telling me that Steve Nash and his staff, over those months, years, weeks, whatever, months, weeks, however you want to count it, they couldn't alter their game plan a little bit to maximize the potential of the team? Steve Nash addresses the media after the games. He's like, oh, this is the team that's still learning how to play together. Dude, it's game 2 of the it's game 2 of the first round. You're in the playoffs. What do you mean? What do you mean? I felt it would have just been better off if they didn't make the playoffs at all. If the play-in never existed and they finished 9th in the standings, it would have been better off. It would have been an easier way to be let down instead of having this team go to the playoffs against Boston and just get thrown around like it's fucking WWE. Looking like, I don't know wrestling, but looking like, I don't know. It's like if you put Joe Biden in the wrestling ring against Triple H or John Cena or whomever. I'm not a fucking wrestling guy. It's just so like saddening almost. And not to be like a weeb over sports, but I am 100%. It just sucks when you emotionally invest in something and you don't feel that you get that reciprocation. Like, at least for Timberwolves fans, for example, or Pelicans fans, for example, they're most likely going to lose to Memphis and New Orleans. But you can at least watch those teams and be like, yeah, they left everything on the floor. They played to their potential. Brooklyn is not playing to a smidge of their potential. They are faring worse off against Boston as New Orleans is against Phoenix. New Orleans is a worse team, both in terms of talent and in record, and they have a rookie head coach. Granted, Willie Green does have, previous coaching experience, but how are you going to watch the Nets get outcoached by Ime Udoka and then look at teams in the Western Conference who are worse on paper? Those coaches are handling those situations better than Steve Nash is with the Brooklyn Nets. I'm simply just tired of all of the bullshit, throwing this at Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving like it's exclusively their problem. Is it their fault? Actually, yes, this is their fault because they picked Steve Nash. They made their bed. Now they have to lay in it. And now the front office has to decide what to do with Steve Nash. Send him to fucking Denmark. He might not coach, but at least he'll have health care. So, anyway, Yeah, leave a like on the video if you liked it, a dislike if you didn't. I know you guys can't see it, but at least I can. Everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below, and I'm out.